So again, thank you all for coming. I apologize, I have a sinus cold, so I sound a little different today. I do want to really thank the Sargent School District for having us today. I don't know if you knew, but they had a talent show last night, and they were able to not only have that plus practice, but get it all turned around for us today and do that. So a lot of thanks goes out to Sargent, their staff, especially their custodial staff, for helping us out and getting ready today to do this. One of the things that we'll do is talk a little bit about our agenda and where we're going today. We're running already a little behind, but we'll blame Phil Compton on that because he decided he wanted to feed everybody. So thank you, Phil, for doing that. But we're going to start out with our general session, try to shorten it up a little bit so we can get going. We'll take a break from 8:30 to 8:45 for you to go into your PLC groups. For those PLC facilitators, in our training, one of the things we had talked about was a third form that you would need for this afternoon, and I apologize I didn't get that to you, but we'll have copies for everybody for that time to do that, so for facilitators. The next piece is we'll break in, after the general session, we'll break into 2 PLCs times. Those focuses will be on talking about objectives with your peers, and then also talking about DFAs and how it's gone over the last month and a half, how you see it working, what feedback you can get from people who are teaching in your area. We do take a long lunch today, and the PTO here in Sargent has been gracious enough to set up a potato bar. So if you want to stay here, they'd love to have you stay for their fundraiser. If not, we know that there's local area restaurants in the other towns around to do that. When we come back at 1:30, one of the processes that the Valley's been going through is really trying to build around a grant that the federal government is putting out, which is called Race to the Top of the Districts.
Can you please put the mic?
Is that better? Sorry, thank you. It's Race to the Top, and it's a consortium plan, and it's really for districts. And so this is a federal grant. We know there's about 900 applicants for this grant, but we are also, as a consortium, applying for that grant. And we think we've got some really good chances of being able to accomplish what we're laying out in the grant. And so this afternoon, George Welsh is going to present to you all around what is this grant and get some feedback on the grant as we go forward with it. And then finally, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is we have a big chunk of time to provide for you all to work with your PLCs on choice topics. We got a lot of feedback last time that we really wanted the time in order to work with your peers to be able to talk about issues to you that's important for your curriculum area or your age level. So we'll have that time built in to do that. So for the beginning opening sessions, one of my objectives, though, that we got from the feedback last time was trying to understand how this all fits together. How does objectives and DFAs fit with kind of the bigger picture of what we need to do? So my objective for our opening session is really about trying to tie these bigger pieces in together with what's going on in our state. And what we know is going on in our state is a lot of change, a lot of reform efforts going on, and it puts a lot of pressure on us. Things like the accreditation, unified improvement plans, how our districts and our schools are accredited no longer is a system that was just district-based, but it really is on a state formula, and so there's a lot of changes with that. We know that the PART consortium, where TCAP is going or CSAP is going into this common core, we're part of that as our state. We also know the READ Act came out through legislation last year changing CBLA and looking at how we do things a little bit differently on that. We also know that CAP for Kids is something that we've been focused on with the change in curriculum and the change in state standards. And then probably one of the bigger ones is Senate Bill 191. And so these are all a great deal of change that we're all going through. And so with change, sometimes it's good to illustrate the point a little differently.
Broder Ansgar? Ja, det er jeg, ja. Så bra, ok. Ja, hei du. Hei du. Ja. Ja, hva gjelder det? Ja, det er det her. Ja, vil du sitte? Takk. Ja. Jaha. Ja, så jeg har ikke fått gjort noen ting hele formiddag, ja. Okay, nei, jeg beklager at det tar tid, altså skjønner vi holder på å legge om til et helt nytt system, og da skal alle ha hjelp på en gang, vet du. Ja. Så du kommer ikke inn i den, eller? Nei, den bare ligger der. Ok, har du forsøkt å åpne den? Ja, åpne den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel? Nei, det er sant. Nei. Vil du ha en kopp vann? Nei, da, det skal være fort gjort, det skal vi se. Du bare gjør... Der. Sånn.
Ja.
Da er du i gang.
Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også.
Ok.
Ikke sant? Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre.
Ja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her, så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre, så tar du tak i et ark, på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar, ja.
Men når jeg skal tilbake, da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Tar tak der, og så gjør du sånn. Der, så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde i stad. Ikke noe
Ok, så den
forandret.
slutter der,
Ja.
og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte for dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Da bare slår du sammen permene
Ja?
på den måten der. Sånn. Da er den lukket, da ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her nå,
Nei,
altså.
alt ligger lagret inni her nå.
Ja.
Da må du i tilfelle sette fyr på hele greia. Det er kanskje lite sannsynlig. Så.
Ja, ok. Nei, men for det er noe med det at ikke sant, når du har holdt på med skriftruller,
Ja.
så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja, ja, det var godt det, vet du. Det er greit. Ja, flott. Ja, men du, en til før det går. Jeg må bare gå gjennom en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner
Ja.
sånn,
Ja, riktig.
og så, hva har du kalt det?
Blar.
Jeg blar,
Ja, bla videre.
blar, frem og tilbake.
Ja.
Og når,
Teksten ligger der hele tiden.
ja. Og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den.
Oi.
Flott.
Fint det.
Kjempefint.
Ja, flott det.
Nei, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den. Nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Ja, det er fra feil side. Du må åpne fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig, det,
Ja,
altså?
du må åpne fra den siden der. Sånn. Der. Da er den åpen.
Ja vel.
Har du
Ok.
lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Jeg skal følge med som manual og så brukerveiledning. Det er sikkert den der. Der, vet du.
Å ja,
I
den,
den
ja.
står alt sammen.
Ja, men ikke sant, der har du samme problemet. Får den ikke opp. Får åpnet den.
Ok, det skulle vi kanskje ha tenkt på.
So change can be hard, all kinds of change. It's YouTube, you gotta love it. But change, we're seeing a lot of change, and like the book or technology, where it's gonna take some time. What I'd like you to do for just 2 minutes is turn to your neighbor and answer that question. As a classroom teacher, which state reform do you believe will be the hardest to implement? Take 2 minutes to talk to your elbow partner about that question. Boy, you can tell in our group that there's a lot of issues because very few of you were talking about the football game. So I'd ask just by a show of hands, how many of you think that the accreditation law 163 is one of our hardest ones to do? Okay, I think the superintendents all just raised their hands silently because they know. How about the READ Act? How many of you feel that that's going to be one of our most difficult things that we're doing in this reform? Okay. How about CAP for Kids as that one rolls out? The Park Consortium? Okay. How do we go to Common Core? And I know by raising your hand, it's not that it's not important, but the real question is, how many of you think 191 is going to be one of our hardest things that we do? Yeah. I think we all feel that way. But I think we know that this is one that's here, and it's here to stay. And the question is how do we embrace it? How do we make sure that as systems and as individuals that we're ready for the implementation of that change? One of the neat things here in the Valley is we have 4 districts who are in the process of piloting how to do this. And so we already have a lot of resources in our room and in our midst helping us move towards where we need to be on 191. So how does our consortium help us with this? And it's actually, our hope is it helps us with all those initiatives, but I think as you guys illustrated, 191 is the one that's really on a lot of our minds. If you look at educator effectiveness and what the council came out with, they came up with 5 standards. And these are the 5 standards that are included in the rubric for evaluation. And they talk about how teachers need to demonstrate mastery of pedagogical expertise in their content area, that they need to establish safe and inclusive environments, they need to plan and deliver for effective instruction, they need to reflect on their practices, and they need to demonstrate leadership. And those are the 5 areas that were the real focus of the rubrics that came out and the work. And so as we started talking last time about objectives in DFAs, one of our intents is to really focus on standard 1 and 3. It's our belief that by having structured learning going on in our classroom, about teachers being metacognitive about what is happening on a day-to-day basis, and being able to check in with our students on a day-to-day basis about what they're learning and did we accomplish that, we believe that standard 1 and 3 are going to be accomplished quite quickly. And so though that creates a lot of anxiety for many educators that says, well, how am I going to demonstrate that? How am I going to see it? One of the things that we hope with the consortium is that we're providing you the resources and providing you the framework to work with your peers to ensure that those standards are taking place. And I think what we see from the 4 pilot districts is that's exactly what happens. If people are following good, effective teaching instruction, the evaluation comes right with it. And people are scoring in the range that they would expect for themselves by having good structured teaching. And so our hope in the consortium is that we provide you those opportunities. The opportunity to hear about an instructional practice that we believe will help you on that rubric, but more importantly, that it'll improve the education and the effectiveness of what we do for our children. And that will help you know and have a place to have those discussions with peers. Because many of our districts don't have 3, 4, 5 teachers in that subject. Many of us have 1. And so the ability to get with 14 other first grade teachers is a way to really look at how do we do that and have effective instruction going on. Oops. So it's really about great instruction for all the children in the San Luis Valley. One of the things that we did was talked about, well, let's put this model. And again, my goal today is to try to tie some shoestrings together about how these different things fit for each of our districts. And so one of the areas that we talked about is really the top of that, which says we need to have a comprehensive curriculum. And so we started this year for those districts who already had that, was continuing on your comprehensive curriculum. For other districts, one of the options that was taken was to use another district's or another area's curriculum. And so many districts were using one that is called Focal Point. Brian Sevier last time talked about what the state is doing and how they're, through a request of the superintendents across the state and the school boards, that they put together a model curriculum for districts to look at and see that they feel is really balanced. And I know from talking to Brian that we have many people in our districts who were guaranteed spots and have taken that opportunity to be on those consortiums to help us build those at the state level. And so those are rolling out right now. I know they've had quite a few meetings already started, and they're on their timeline to have those ready by January. And I'll show you a timeline here in just a little bit.
Hands, who's been selected to do that? I bet you there's a good set of hands, right?
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. We appreciate your time. So in our ideal world, what we would have done is really totally started with that top one. And what happened is that as the state came online to really help and support us, we kind of jumbled the order. And we know in trying to tie those shoestrings together of where we are, this is one that for us initially is a little out of order. We still believe it's helpful and it'll come together here in January, but we ask you to live in a little limbo on seeing this until they're able to finish it. So where we've really spent our time, boy, I sound good, I apologize, is around this effective instructional cycle. And so what we did is we focused on those 2 bookends last time, talking about objective. Are we metacognitive as a teacher about what is to be accomplished today? We know when we look at our standards and we look at our curriculum, there's a lot of unwrapping that sometimes has to take place. And it's important for us as educators to ensure that we're clear on a daily basis of what we're trying to accomplish. And that was our hope with the objectives to start a lesson for a day. We then focused on the end bookend of DFA and said, if we know we want to accomplish something, how do we know if we got there? How do we know if the kids obtained it? And so we introduced that concept, and I know these concepts are things that teachers, we've been using for years. It's just trying to formalize it for us in the Valley. But that DFA is about how do I check in? How do I know if I did what I thought I was going to accomplish? It's today. And so we talked about that. And so for today, we're going to spend a great deal of time allowing staff to get together and really talk about how did that work after the first month and a half. What struggles were presented for you and how your peers can help you. When we come back next month in November, we're going to talk about the middle part. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is what's called the gradual release model. And really, for many of you in elementary, you used to hear it called I do, we do, you do. It's that model of how do we get direct instruction to our children? How do we help support and scaffold them with this new knowledge and be able to then change any misinformation they have? And then finally to set them free, not to learn on their own, but to demonstrate and use those skills that you gave them. And so we'll spend time doing that. As we roll into the end of this and into next year, you're going to see that yellow one, which is about effective feedback. How do we use that information? And then finally, our end goal for the consortium comes with this grant or without the grant is around how do we really personalize our learning experience for students? How do we differentiate? How do we make sure that regardless of how they come into our classroom, high or low, that they're getting the skills that they need to succeed and excel in our particular area? And so that's the model that we're laying out for the Valley and the consortium to do that. The timeline for that looks a little bit like this. One of the things that we did, and I haven't mentioned yet, is that these tiers of professional development are not just for instructional staff. They take place for principals, they take place for superintendents, and they're taking place for boards. Because we felt that every level of our school districts need to make sure that they understand what's going on. And so you'll see some dates. The instructional staff is the purple, so that's where we sit, October 12th, time on objectives and DFAs. We'll talk about gradual release model in November. And the 11th, on the 11th of January, Brian Sevier and the state staff will be back to introduce their curriculum and talk about it with us. And then in the February meeting, we'll be coming together and trying to put all three of those together and have those same dialogues. At the principals level, we're really focusing on 191. You'll see this morning, your principals will be in and out of groups. This afternoon, they're in a training solely on 191 to talk about that. On the 29th, and this date for principals who are in the room may change. You'll determine that this afternoon. But we'll be talking about this gradual release model, and then they'll be coming together to talk about curriculum probably in December. For the superintendent level, this week alone, superintendent spent a great deal of time talking about 191, talking about the gradual release model and learning how we feel those fits in ours. And then in November 13th, Brian Sevier and his staff will be coming back to meet with the superintendents around what they've created and the people who raised their hand, what they've created in a draft form for us to see and make sure that we ensure that we feel like this is a good fit for our district and our consortium as it rolls out, because no one's seen it yet. And so we want to make sure before we commit to anything that we all have a chance to really look at it. And so that's our timeline for this year in the consortium and what we're hoping to accomplish. And so with that, I know many of you have seen this video, but I think it really illustrates what we're doing in the consortium, because in everything in education, you don't get to stop. We don't get to reboot, take time off, retool the factory, and then come back and start producing what we need to do. We're always going. We always have our students with us, even in the summer for most of our districts. And so I think what we're trying to do in the consortium is a little bit like this.
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high.
Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing. You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards,
owls.
these people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
I get a lot of thanks up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, the look in his eyes, that's all the thanks I need.
EDS, managing the complexities of the digital economy.
So, a little bit like that. We're building the plane as we're flying, and the thing is we have talented people in this valley, and I think we all believe that we can build this plane while it's flying and have a great effect on the children here in this valley. So as part of my DFA, I would ask you to turn to your partner and explain to them how you see these shoestrings or the process that we're laying forward for us for this year playing out. So take a minute to turn to your neighbor and see if I accomplished my objective. Thank you. I think much like our classrooms, you usually find that when you do your DFA, you start asking, what kind of instruction can I change? And so we'll continue to do that. One of the things that we did this time versus last time is we really did take your feedback on how to do it.